Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Today is Monday, September 18th, 2023. We are here in the Commissioners' Conference Room on the second floor of the Larimer County Administrative Services Building. I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Scheibig-Nally, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. I'm here joined at the conference table by my colleagues, Larimer County Commissioner John Gonzalez and Larimer County Commissioner Kristen Stevens. We are here for a work session with our Department of Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources. Also joining us today is our Larimer County Manager, Lorenda Volker, and our Assistant County Manager, Lori Cadrich. They're both on both ends to keep an eye on us, I guess, today. And then we have our Director of Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources, Lesli Ellis. And Lesli, I know there's a lot of folks in the room today. I'm assuming they're all here to assist with, we have 4 items on the agenda, and a full agenda, so I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you for being here and your work.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. And yes, we have lots of people. I am going to quickly turn it over to Eric Freed, who will present the first item, and I believe many of the folks here are here to support that item. And then Aaliyah Rodriguez will support the second item. Eric's going to talk about energy efficient codes and presenting some information about the current status and looking for some direction from you all, and he can explain what he's here to do exactly. So that'll probably be the bulk of our conversation. Rebecca's out this week, so I do have one brief update on her behalf after that. So we'll hand it over to you, Eric.
Thank you. Welcome, Eric.
Hopefully this PowerPoint will work. I don't know what's going on here.
Looks like it may be a core issue.
Yeah, it was working moments ago, of course.
It was on before. Now I don't know what's going on. I did include that. I didn't bring them with me, but I sent them to all the commissioners. So I don't know if you still have your PowerPoint that I sent you about energy efficient codes. Okay.
And,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And for the viewing audience, it is posted on the agenda, with the agenda.
Anyway, yeah, several of my staff were here, and I also asked Heidi Pruis to come because this backs right up against some of the things we're doing in Climate Smart and Future Ready. In case you don't know, this is Juan Mancha, our lead plans examiner, and Athena Zimny, one of our plans examiners. So what I was here to talk about is energy efficient codes, because I know you guys get questions all the time about why don't we adopt more energy efficient codes, or what else can we do? And there's a lot of state and federal money floating around right now to support energy efficient codes. So I thought it'd be good to come here and talk to you and sort of wrap it all up in a package and talk about some choices we have going forward and kind of explain where we're at. So I was going to present information on the current county codes. There are also state minimum codes being adopted. Commissioner Scheibig-Nally knows about that on the wildfire side. And to talk about our projected timeline for the next time we adopt codes. To talk a little bit about Soul Smart, which is becoming a solar-friendly community, which we have not taken that step yet. And then see if you'd like to pursue maybe grant or other funding opportunities for more energy efficient codes. So, do you want to play with that? Okay. So what I was going to cover today is where our current code is at, our energy codes and related codes, the state minimum codes, a little bit of comparing the state codes and our codes, triggers and deadlines to adopt state codes, the timeline for the next code adoption, and talk a little bit about some of the climate smart initiatives that are being formalized that will relate to building and energy codes, and then give you some options to look at in terms of either adopting the Solar Ready Code Appendix, hopefully next time, becoming Soul Smart, or applying for grants. So just as a reminder, and I know the commissioners are aware of this, Larimer County adopted the 2021 codes, the residential code, the building code, and the energy code. It took effect March 1st, 2022. And the basic model codes are published every 3 years by International Code Council and then get adopted with local amendments. And I think it was the first time Larimer County was actually the first government entity within Larimer County and all the cities to put the 2021 codes in effect. And our codes, because that's what the commissioners wanted, included some amendments that went above code that required new dwelling units to be electric vehicle ready and solar ready. We do not require making, oh, thank you. Was it just not plugged in enough, or?
No, we just
figured out.
needed the projection
Okay.
setting on required Athena.
It required some Athena, thank you. We do not require our buildings to be electric ready, and what that is there's a big push towards building electrification to sort of phase out gas appliances and to get all the energy from the electrical grid, as well as make the electrical grid clean energy. Obviously, if you get your electricity by burning coal or gas, it's not that clean, but if you get your energy from wind power or solar power, then it's very clean. So there's push in that direction, and so buildings that are not already all electric are being asked to be sort of ready to be changed to be electric appliances in the future. Our land use code also has requirements for electric vehicle parking spaces, depending on the different uses, whether they're residential or commercial or whatever. So we put that in our land use code, and I think the commissioners are aware of all these things because all these discussions about land use and building code have happened with you. These are the amendments we put in our code. One of them is about radon mitigation systems. We're not talking about that today. But just so you can see, all new dwelling units that have an attached garage or carport have to have an actual 50 amp circuit that goes to a receptacle in the garage or in the carport where the car is likely to be. So one per dwelling unit. And also they have to be renewable energy ready. And the way we determined it is you'd actually have to run a circuit from under the roof, most likely to support solar, rooftop solar, to the electric meter or to the electric panel. And then this is just the land use code section where it talks about electric vehicle parking spaces and how many you need, and depending on what kind of use you're doing, actually. So now I'm sure everyone's heard that the state, based on law a couple years ago, there was an energy board set up, and it was mandated to produce a model electric ready code as well as a solar ready code. And I'm not going to go through the whole code because it's 50 pages long, but this gives you kind of the flavor of the electric ready and solar ready code. Applies to buildings, dwelling units, and other buildings, and it's to prepare new buildings for solar photovoltaic or solar thermal, EV charging, and electrification. So what I think are the major provisions of that is for new buildings and major renovations and additions, then if you have combustion equipment, that means furnace, boiler, water heater, cooking, clothes drying, or lighting that uses fuel, gas, or oil, then you have to have a dedicated, appropriately sized branch circuit, a nearby receptacle, and then space in the electrical panel to put in electric equipment in the future. Major renovations and additions is not defined in the law, in the rules. They left it up to locals to decide what's a major renovation or addition. And like a lot of other codes, this state code is a minimum. Larimer County and others can go beyond that code, but we can't be less than that code. Commercial requirements are very similar. So basically, if you have a gas water heater now, you have to make provisions so that in the future you can replace that with an electric water heater, or maybe replace your furnace with a heat pump. So you have to have room for those things as well. Now, in terms of the solar ready, any new residence with at least 600 square feet of roof area oriented generally south has to provide at least 300 square foot of solar ready zone. And again, you don't have to actually run the circuit, but you have to have space in the electrical panel and label it for future solar, and then show on the plans at least one pathway where you could run the solar from the roof to the panel. Commercial requirements are similar, but they don't go with the square footage. They go with 40% of the roof area. And then for new dwelling units, they require at least one EV-ready space with a 40-amp branch circuit. And like us, there's a distinction between EV installed, where you actually put the charger in, EV ready, where you run the circuit, EV capable, where there's maybe an empty conduit and room in the panel. So they require at least one. The commercial requirements are more complicated just because they also, like us, have a matrix where they talk about what kind of building is it, how many EV ready spaces, how many EV capable spaces, etc. So this is similar to our land use code, and honestly I haven't had the chance to go through and compare the fine details of this compared to our land use code, but we're pretty much on the same wavelength. So a quick comparison of the county and state codes is we don't at this point require the buildings to be electric ready, that is easily converted to electric only appliances as the state does. We require dwellings not just to be solar electric ready, but to actually install the circuit, whereas the state's just requiring labeling the panel and showing a potential circuit later. And we had discussion about that with the Board of Appeals and with you all as to whether we wanted to actually install the circuit, which would make it easier, but what if they come along later and something changes, maybe then there will be wasted time and energy. But we require the circuit actually be installed. The state doesn't. Again, the state requires a solar-ready zone. We don't at this point. We require the EV space if the home has an attached garage or carport. The state requires it if you have an attached or detached garage or other designated on-site parking spaces. So that gets a little tricky because you could have an apartment complex and the dedicated parking space is some distance away, but under state law, you'd still have to run it over to that parking space.
Eric, can I pause you just for a second and ask a question about that last slide? Requires the zone on roofs and county does not. Is that, so anytime there's a hailstorm, are people, then they replace the roofs, or they're going to have to make their roofs solar ready when they replace their roofs?
No, we don't have any requirements yet for the solar ready, but usually with a requirement like that, it would be at the point of new construction or when you do a major addition. It's pretty hard when you have an existing roof. When you go back, you may not have a solar ready zone. You might have plumbing pipes or gas pipes, gas vents or something coming through the roof. So this would basically be for new construction or major renovations or additions if we went with the state minimum.
All right, thank you.
So these are the triggers to adopt the state minimum code. This was HB 221362, set up the Energy Code Board and directed that board to adopt the solar ready, electric ready code by June 1st, 2023, which they did. And then any building division, any building department that adopts or updates a new code between now and July 30th, 2026 has to adopt at a minimum the 2021 Energy Code and their Colorado Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready Code. We've already adopted the 21 Energy Code, so that's not an issue. Like I said before, we already have amendments that we require solar ready and EV ready, but we don't have the model electric ready. So if we were to adopt any new codes, we would have to adopt the Colorado Model Electric Ready Code. And then also after July 1st, 2026, then we'd have to adopt the Low Energy and Carbon Code. And what that is that was the second charge to the Energy Board, that they have to adopt a Low Energy and Carbon Code by next June 1st, based either on the 21 or 24 Energy Code, whichever one is more efficient when they analyze it. It's going to be the 24. I already know that that's a more efficient code. So they'll be adopting some basis of the 24 Energy Code, and then if the code adoption was after July 1st, 2026, we'd have to adopt that. So if we adopt a new code next year, and I'll get into that in a second, we wouldn't have to adopt their model energy code, but we might want to do so anyway. And then at the same time, and this is something Commissioner McNally is highly aware of, is SB 23166 established the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. And I understand you're on the board now. Is that official or?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I know who is, but they're still announcing some of those things. They have not even decided when they're meeting or not. My name was put forth, but I know there's been some negotiations and things behind. I do know Boulder County Commissioner has been appointed by the State Senate President, but I think that board is still getting formed and figuring out when they're meeting. But yes, it's starting to move forward.
So that board is charged with defining a state wildland-urban interface, because all the cities and counties have slightly different ones. So to use the best science to define the wildfire hazard area, basically, and then to adopt a minimum state wildfire code by July 1st, 2025, and then within 90 days, all local governments in that wildfire hazard area would have to adopt at least that code or better. So there's a lot of state codes coming in 2025, which is why I think we probably want to hold off adopting any new codes for a little bit. So the codes are published every 3 years. We're on the 21s now. The next set of codes is the 24s. Usually we like to review those codes the year they come out, so next year, and then put them into effect early in the following year. So I think the 21 codes went into effect in March 2022, and the 18 codes went into effect early 2019. But if we did that next year and we adopt our code early in the year, then in June the state comes up with a model energy code. July it comes up with a wildfire code. We'd have to go back probably and amend our codes if we hadn't already incorporated that to make them be at least as stringent as the state. So it seems to me the best thing to do would be for once, and I hate doing this because I like shooting for January 1st of the following year, but to hold off a little bit on the 24 codes, to review them next year with the other cities and counties, to try to engage the public as much as possible, even more than last time. But to hold off and then wait and see what the state comes up with in terms of energy and wildfire. and then do it all at once, so we don't have to go back and amend our code once or twice. So that's generally what I'd like to do, but I wanted to make sure that the commissioners are basically on board with that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there are several proposed climate smart actions. I don't think this is finalized yet, but I think these are going to be approved that relate to building and energy codes and are going to involve building division personnel. So there's a proposal to do, and Heidi, if this isn't the most recent one, you can correct me, but I got this from your last email. So developing a navigator's technical assistance program, because we can mandate new codes, but the number of new buildings being built pales in comparison to the number of existing buildings. And codes are like a stick, they're mandatory. But if we set up a navigator's program with technical assistance, help people through the process, show them all rebates that are available, guidance, et cetera, financial incentives, then we think we could encourage a lot of people to take energy efficiency actions without requiring them to. So that will be run, I believe, by Adam Crow is in charge of that, but I'm going to be providing technical assistance for that. And then the second one, we've updated that a little bit, convene a regional group, including all municipalities in the county, to update building and land use codes. We're going to separate those because updating land use codes is a planning function, and I believe our planning folks are going to do that. But I was asked to be in charge of that one to get all the other municipalities on board to adopt the most updated building codes, indoor air quality, and healthy home standards. So that's a big lift, but that also requires us to work with all the other counties and towns, which is I'd be doing that anyway, and try to bring them along so that they're also adopting the most recent codes. They will probably go to the 24 codes anyway. A lot of the smaller towns skip the 21 codes. And there's also a big push to electrify new buildings, support electric grid expansion, provide education, training, and incentives. So the point of this was just whatever we do with our codes, we're going to be deeply involved with bringing people together and trying to set up these programs to advance energy efficiency and building electrification. So just a couple other things to think about when we get to the 24 code adoption. There are appendices in the energy code to be solar ready and or net zero. The solar ready appendix is pretty much exactly the same as the state model solar ready code. I compared them. There's just a couple small differences. So we could do that. I don't know if the board would want to consider going to net zero. That means, the amount of energy you produce on site equals or exceeds the amount of energy consumed on site. So you can only get there with on-site renewable energy, basically, or possibly having a share in a solar garden or something like that. The other thing is we can apply to be a Soul Smart community. There's a bunch of points that are required to get to bronze level, silver level. We started analyzing that in our division and realized we're probably already at the bronze level based on the things we already have, like a solar checklist and online permitting and for solar and things like that. But the first step to doing that has to be a written determination by elected officials that the community wants to be Soul Smart. So if you folks were interested in doing that, we would ask for some kind of proclamation or whatever saying, yeah, we'd like to pursue that, and then we would take it from there. And we can also seek state, federal, and private grants for administering and adopting advanced energy codes. And I don't have a whole lot of experience with that, but Heidi does, and there's other people in our agency who could help do that. So if the commissioners were interested, because there's so much starting to go on in this sector, which I think exceeds our capacities and expertise. So I guess that's my presentation. I just want to see if the board, first of all, generally agreed with not adopting little code updates piecemeal, but to roll it all into the 24 review and knowing it's going to take a little longer. If the board would like to pursue Soul Smart, and if you'd like us to start looking into seeking grants or other funding.
Thank you, Eric, for that presentation. A lot of information there. Before I ask my colleagues if they have any comments or questions, and then I'll make my comments and questions after that. But I have one clarifying question real quick. This sounds like a lot of work capacity-wise either way, and of course makes kind of common sense to kind of bundle it together to kind of do it in one big swoop. Knowing that we're looking at couple different budget situations and things, but some of this we're going to have to do. Have you thought about the do you have ideas of capacity issues and how much extra time or energy that might be for some of these ideas? Just curious about that, if you've looked at that for the work plan and kind of what's going forward.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. What we did last time with the code adoption is all the local building officials got together and talked anyway, so we were already pretty much trying to get everyone talking about and moving towards adopting the codes. But that decision isn't really made by the building officials, it's made by the town or city leadership. So I think there are our consultants through Climate Smart and Future Ready so they can help us with the engagement piece. So we have that available. That's another reason I'm thinking we might want to start seeking grant funding or something, at least on a short-term basis, because there's a lot of stuff going on here, not just the usual code adoption, but all these Climate Smart programs we're looking at.
Great. I appreciate that. And just, thanks colleagues for letting me ask that clarifying question. I just needed to think about that before I made my comments. So Commissioner Gonzalez, would you like to start?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll try. I'm still processing all the information you just provided us. Regarding these three questions, with question number one, what you explained to us earlier, Eric, is that the proposed timeline would be that with the 2024 Energy Code, that your team would review that, but we wouldn't necessarily consider implementation by January 1st of 2025 and wait for the state to come up with its guidelines for the model, whatever they're calling it. Did I get that mostly right?
Yes, I think we would want to review the 24 energy and other codes, but then put it on hold and wait and see what the state minimum codes are. And so that would mean if we're waiting till, I don't know, the state's supposed to get their wildfire code done by July 1st, it might be earlier, but wait till after that to then do a final review, bring it to you, and have it take effect in the fall, I suppose.
May I continue? Thank you. Are there any downsides to your recommendation to hold off until we see the other codes?
Well, I suppose if you're, a strong energy efficiency advocate, and I'm sort of there myself, then you would want to see us go to the 24 energy code as soon as possible. So it would be a little bit delayed, but to me, that's not a huge deal. It might be delayed 9 months. We'd be on our current code a little bit longer. I think the other building departments will probably want to do something similar. I mean, because it just, to me, makes sense to not adopt a code and then find out that there's a new code that you have to adjust to.
And I suppose one advantage, based on the comment that the chair made, was around capacity issues. That might help a little bit there,
Right.
in that you don't have to pass something and then come back and potentially change it. Is that correct?
Right.
Then I'd like to, shall I continue? Just go to the second bullet?
Sure. Just, that sounds like a great plan, Commissioner.
Soul Smart designation. Yeah, it would be good to have more details, of course. And I'm wondering, at this juncture, intuitively I would say yes, but I don't really know what Soul Smart designation means. And I'm wondering, what are the benefits of being designated as a Soul Smart community? It sounds good, I like it.
Yeah. I think it's basically just sort of puts out the welcome mat, as it were, that we're a solar-friendly community. This is a map from Soul Smart of, there's 500 Soul Smart communities around the nation now, and there's 33 in Colorado, including Fort Collins, Longmont, Boulder, and some of our neighbors. So I don't think it binds us to do anything, other than if we were trying to go for the gold status, we have to find a way to issue all solar permits within 3 days, and I'm not sure we can do that. I mean, there's different point levels involved with being bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. But to get to bronze or silver, I think we're pretty much already there, and it would just be basically a declaration that we support solar energy in this county.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. In all of these deliberations on the part of your team and the planning folks, et cetera, has there been any discussion about the potential impacts on cost of housing? I think a lot of this would pertain to new residential and commercial development, as well as, quote, major renovations. Hopefully somebody will define that.
We will.
But I guess I'm wondering, especially in light of the article in the newspaper yesterday about proposed increases in water fees the city of Fort Collins is considering, that will have a major impact on the cost of housing. Has there been any type of analysis to see how these things might impact the cost of housing? And don't get me wrong, I think we're in a similar place regarding energy efficiency and transitioning to renewable energy and so forth.
The short answer is no, I don't think we've yet done an analysis of what these things would cost. We could do the research and see if someone else has already done that. In terms of making a home electric ready, I don't think it's a huge cost because you can take out your gas furnace and put your electric furnace right in the same place. It's more running the circuits and having the panel. But that's probably the big cost as we move towards electrification. People are going to need bigger services. They maybe need 200 or 320 amp, and are the transformers out there available on the feeders, and what's it going to cost people? So there's definitely a cost. I'm aware of that. And that's probably the biggest political discussion. Is the payback adequate? Because they're higher upfront costs, but you save money down the road, and how does that affect especially affordable housing?
And thank you. And it would be helpful, along with any type of economic analysis, how much would these kinds of actions help us to address our greenhouse gas goals, greenhouse gas reduction goals? Or I guess it's referred to as climate pollution or something like that.
Right. I mean, it certainly would if we can reduce, buildings are one of the major contributors of greenhouse gases. So the more we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, that's going to help us
That's
with
one
our
of the
climate
biggest
goals.
sources, right?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest sources.
Especially all the buildings that are powered by
Gas.
natural gas,
Right.
et cetera.
Okay, just interest of time, Commissioner, are you, in case, we need to come back, if you have other thoughts, can I
Yes,
go ahead and let?
perhaps you can come back.
Okay,
I don't
Commissioner
forget what else I was gonna
Stevens,
say.
would you like to go through that, those questions quickly so we can?
Sure, yes. I do agree with the proposed timeline. It's unfortunate we might have to wait a little bit longer, but like you said, I don't think it's the end of the world, and it makes more sense than going back and doing all those revisions when the state codes come out, so I'm definitely supportive of that. Yes, I would like to pursue Soul Smart designation. Quickly looking at the slide you had set up, it looks like we are at least at bronze and, maybe quite a ways towards the silver already. So, but I think having that designation is important because it reminds people about how important solar is, and so, that we can hopefully help people ease into that transition. Yes, let's find additional funding sources for energy code adoption. I did have a question about, I actually just put solar on my house, so I'm fairly familiar with right now there are rebates, at least for the next 10 years, I think federal rebates for people who are putting solar on, so significant rebates. So, I think that reminding folks that, as we transition into new codes, that they also will have access to some funding that's out there. And I know, and I don't know if other electric providers provide this, but City of Fort Collins also provides a rebate for solar. So, and maybe Xcel or whoever people get their electricity does as well. So, while costs might go up, there are some places where people can kind of recoup some of their costs even before they see the reduction in their electric bills. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens, and I agree with that. The savings in the long run kind of pay off. Really quickly, before forget, I'm not sure if Headwater Economics has data on the solar, but I do know they have data on the wildfire resiliency costs. Dr. Kimiko and those folks at Headwater Economics have got some really good studies and information. It's not the only, but I use that a lot with our wildfire and forest health discussions. And they're also on the national board, the Biden Commission, with Director Dan Gibbs from the Department of Natural Resources, and that recommendation should be coming out probably end of this month or next month. So we're waiting to hear that. We haven't even got a hint about what's going to be said, but they're both on that. My first question is, can we ask current applications who are looking at new construction to go ahead and, we can't make them, but can we ask them or encourage them to go ahead and go for the 2024 codes next year when they come out? saying this would be better for you in the long run? Is it something we can encourage or make sure they are aware of, or what does that look like? If we have to wait till 2025, there's still growth and building happening, and so can we somehow gently or enthusiastically encourage to think about the codes? Just curious about that.
We can encourage them. Yeah, we couldn't require them until the code was in effect. And sometimes people ask if they can use the more current code than the one that's adopted because something in the code's easier for them. And I've always allowed that, so that, yeah, if you want to use even before we switched electric codes, people were asking to use the new electric code because it was better in some ways than the old one. So that's a possibility.
Awesome. That's good to hear, because I think anytime we can ask people to, consider going above and beyond and not just doing kind of the bare minimum would be great. So I agree generally with the proposed timeline for the code updates. I think capacity-wise, it doesn't make sense with all these changes coming out to just kind of have staff kind of kind of do an outreach or education. I think that's really important to try to condense staff time, but also help the public. I think it'd be confusing to continually updating things, and maybe if we did it all one time, that might be less confusing for the public. I'm very curious about this navigator position. I know that sounds like another FTE or position. I don't know if that's going to be absorbed, just kind of extra duties. I think that would be really helpful for some of us. I know I had questions because we're looking at also putting in solar, but it seems like the companies we talk to aren't really familiar when I ask questions about code stuff. And then also wondering if there's some information we could share with landowners in the unincorporated areas that may not want to put it on the roofs, but putting out in the field. And I think that those questions, I find that some of the companies can't answer, and then as a busy full-time working person, it's hard to kind of navigate and ask those questions. So I'm fully informed. I tend to feel like I know the code better than some of these folks, and so my husband kind of looks at me and said, well, you need to have the answers then, and I haven't had time to pull those answers up. So just curious about that, if we can have, that would be interesting to help provide folks if we're moving that way. Also, I wholeheartedly would like to pursue the Soul Smart designation. If we're already there at the bronze level, it makes sense to go ahead and do it. It doesn't sound like it costs us anything. It would just help put us in with the other counties who are already doing this and just give us this designation. I think it would be an alignment with our Climate Smart and Future Ready plan, trying to be showing that we are moving in that direction. That's the area we want to go. I think it's in line with the work that we're doing, and so I wholeheartedly at least going for bronze and maybe seeing what it takes to do the next level. And so I think that's a great thing. I'm glad you brought that up. And of course, would always like to learn more. Anytime we can pursue funding sources with Energy Code Adoption Administration, I think would be great. I do believe there's some money if we look for it. I know it's there. I just don't know how to get it right now because it just feels like there's so much changing with the Infrastructure Reduction Act and some of this money from the federal government. I think there's a lot of things that for us to implement and move things forward, especially when it comes to resiliency and energy efficiencies. I think there's some money there, and I think anytime we can leverage those opportunities for us to advance our work is fantastic. So I know that takes time to look those down, but I know I'm looking over at Heidi Pruis over here, who is, I know, keeping an eye on all of that, and I know maybe our federal partners have some ideas too, so that might be a good chance to ask some of our congressional delegation about that as well. And then I think you're interested with lighting for some of our agricultural and some of our unincorporated properties. If we encourage with these dark skies for people to maybe get away from even electrical and using solar kind of downward light sky friendly lighting for their properties to kind of help protect our dark skies, but also I know we have a lot of folks feel like their lighting from their neighbors has been intrusive, so I think that's also something I'd be curious if there's some funding or some direction on maybe getting some of the outdoor lighting in some of these remote areas or unincorporated areas, especially on the urban fringe and things, to maybe encourage folks to go to solar kind of lighting. I might just be curious if there's funding and some ways for that. So otherwise, this is exciting. But I pretty much agree with your recommendations. I would love to do these all tomorrow, but I think it's better to do them all at once and save you all from repeating, so.
Thanks.
So I think that you've got your direction, I think, sort of. Commissioner Kafalis?
Yes, to move forward on all these three areas, I'd still like more information about SoulSmart, and if that means a future work session, I think that would be useful, at least for me. And also, I'd be curious, it's not directly related to what we're talking about, I don't think, but I'm wondering if your shop or someone can provide us an update with how well we are using the CPACE and the PACE program in Larimer County, since we, in the previous iteration of the board, approved allowing that to happen. And for those of you, since I used an acronym, I should explain what the acronym is, but CPACE is Commercial Property Assets Clean Energy Program, and then I think there's something on the residential side. I'm curious how well we're marketing it, if anybody's using it, and is that an area that we should be exploring further? If it's appropriate, that might be part of a future work session to understand better about SoulSmart.
Yeah, it's not our agency that does CPACE, but we can have whoever does that. I think that maybe, its own property taxes, come back and talk to you. And I can definitely come back to give you more details about SoulSmart and seek some kind of, declaration from the commissioners, so that we can schedule that for a future work session. I get the direction that people are in general in favor of it, but you want to know the details of SoulSmart.
Yeah, I'm all for it, so I think you've got your direction, and the sooner the better for me on the SoulSmart, because it sounds like we're already doing it, we might as well just have it.
We'll get on that.
And then I think that's it, so thank you, Eric, thank you, team, and look forward to learning more.
Thank you.
So Leslie, next, that was just the first thing, we've got some more things to talk about.
Aaliyah, come on up. And Aaliyah Rodriguez is our Housing Stability Manager, is going to share with you some information about Proposition 123 opt-in.
Thank you, Leslie. As said, I'm Aaliyah Rodriguez. I'm the Housing Stability Program Manager. I don't have a presentation, I apologize, but I'm here to ask for direction regarding Larimer County opting into Proposition 123. One moment, please. Here we go. As a reminder, Proposition 123, what it does is it dedicates $300 million or 0.1% of existing taxable income to affordable housing. Local governments that opt in are required to prioritize review and approval for affordable housing projects by 2026, and to commit to increasing affordable housing in their area by 3% every year. By opting in, jurisdictions are not guaranteed funding, but they do open the door for affordable housing developers in their jurisdiction to compete for funding. So that's just an overview. There's lots of buckets that come with this proposition of funds, and by the county opting in, again, it opens the door for developers and for Larimer County to apply for these funds. There's different ones that would apply directly to us, such as land banking dollars, capacity building dollars, and things of those nature that we would be able to apply for. So I've been working for several months to try and look through how we can opt in. We would need to, again, commit to that 3% increase over 3 years. It doesn't mean that we have to do 3% every year. It means that at the end of the 3-year commitment, we have to have hit the 9%. Using an alternate methodology, we've gotten it down to 98 units over that 3-year period, or about 33 a year. For the Larimer County commitment. And the Larimer County commitment applies to unincorporated Larimer County. And that commitment can be met in a variety of ways. It can be met by actual affordable housing development. It could be met by preservation of current affordable housing development, which would mean further investigation and working within our mobile home park communities and working on ways to preserve those as affordable moving forward, as an example. And another way we could hit that commitment is through developing intergovernmental agreements with our municipalities, with our cities and our towns that are already doing the development. And by helping them with their affordable housing development, we're able to use some of those units towards our commitment. And those conversations have been ongoing, happening since we started looking into Proposition 123. We've been having conversations with the municipalities about what that could look like and what collaboration can be put into place.
Can I ask a real quick question on that real quick, if you don't
course.
mind? So, as we've been trying to go on all these sessions and trying to learn more and understand, when you talk about the, because that was something they always said we could do, is we could partner, and do we both get a partial credit or a full credit for that 3%? Do we all get credit for all the units fully, or do we only get partial?
We get partial. So that would be defined in the IGA. So no IGA has been created yet that I know of across the state, but multiple counties and jurisdictions are working on creating one. And what it would mean, the language in the proposition implies it would be a number of units based on the amount of financial resources brought to the project. If we contributed $1 million towards this project, that equates to X amount of units from the project as a whole, and that's what would be used towards our commitment.
And I don't know if my colleagues had questions. I had one quick, go ahead, Commissioner. I just had a question about the baseline, and does every IGA have a different baseline? But go ahead and go with Commissioner Hollis.
In terms of contributing to a project, does that also include issuing our private activity bond? And even if the actual housing is built within the municipality, does it have to be in the unincorporated?
That's what the IGA would address, and I'm definitely plan to work with the cities to get something in place so we would get credit for those private activity bond contributions.
And the housing units could be located within the municipality?
Correct.
If that's what the IGA spells out?
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yeah, the question I have is around the methodology that you're using for to come to the baseline. So are you comfortable are we using that same methodology that like City of Fort Collins used that was approved? Or are we using kind of our own metric and we're hoping it gets approved?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a mixture of both. So I worked closely with Community Investment Alliance and their technical assistance. Also, definitely was working closely with Rebecca, and our Community Development Director, just to make sure that our baseline really reflected our community. The proposition is a little limited in that you're required to use a specific data set to set your baseline. And the data set that they require us to use uses a lot of City of Fort Collins data. So I'm confident in that we'll be able to explain why our unincorporated areas are very different from City of Fort Collins, and that's why our baseline is going to be different than if we just used the tool the way that it was intended.
So it's interesting that you can use, that we only have to create 98 units in 3 years, but we can still use units that are created. It's pretty complicated, I think, in the way, but thank you for figuring it out for us. I'll just go ahead and say I think we should opt in. We certainly have communities that are supportive of us opting in. There's no drawbacks to opting in. I mean, the only thing that would happen if we didn't hit our numbers is that we couldn't access those same dollars for like, I think, a year. Is that correct? But then could reapply for those kind of dollars. And 98 units in 3 years doesn't seem impossible. It seems like a pretty doable number, which is good. And then especially because it includes preservation. So if we can figure out how to tie in the mobile home parks as preservation, I mean, I don't think it's going to be hard to get to 98 units. I mean, of course, we'd like to even get above 98 units, but I mean, because of all those reasons, I think it's smart to go. And I also know that the sooner we opt in, the sooner we're able to apply for those dollars. And I know if I remember right, the land banking dollars have a deadline of, that's coming up maybe in November or something like that. And so if there's anything we have in mind to use, if we want to apply for any of this stuff, it's better to get in early. And honestly, the earlier we get in, the less competition there is for those dollars. And so there's a lot of reasons to kind of just jump in. And so, yes, I'm supportive. Thank you. Thank you for all your work on it. And thank you for organizing the communities and really, kind of for everybody to try to figure out how we do this and how we do this well and how we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaliyah. I appreciate the work you've done and to kind of coordinate with folks to help us kind of navigate this and the work you're doing to bring the housing authorities together and have this discussion. It's been really valuable. I said it earlier in another work session, your work has been very invaluable to me, and I just want to really commend you for the tremendous work you've done. The reason I asked a lot about the baseline, and that was one of my questions that I'm glad Commissioner Stevens asked, was about our baseline and how we got there. And so when we do those IGAs with the municipalities, there might just be 2, as I think, or maybe 3 right now, possibly, because I don't think the other smaller towns are doing that. We can each have our different baseline. We don't have to have their baseline. We can have our own baseline in each of those IGAs. Is that correct?
So our baseline and their baseline will not be included in the IGA. The IGA is a separate piece.
Okay.
So we have our commitment to the state, which has our baseline listed in it, and and our commitment to try and reach that. And then our IGA with each of our partner municipalities is going to be separate from that.
Okay. And so any things that we're doing right now, because I know some of these projects are happening right now, so if we opt in sooner, we can get credit for some of those projects, because is it when they get started, or when they get ground broken, or when they get finished? Because maybe when they get finished, if we could start sooner, we can get credit for a couple of those already. That's what I still haven't got answered, not from you, but others I've asked that question.
Definitely, and that's a great question. And right now, the language just states that you get credit for it when the permit gets approved, which is still a pretty generic way to go about it, so it might be changed over time. But as you said, you make a great point. Right now is a great time for us to opt in, especially with the contributions that the county's making towards development happening. So
I'm all in. I think this is important for us to also signal to the rest of the county that this is important and that we can do a lot together. I know some municipalities haven't really even talked about it publicly, and I think it's really important for us to because I get asked a lot. I got asked all weekend, are you going to opt in? I said, we haven't talked about it yet. We're having a discussion this week. So I'm all in. I think it's important, and I appreciate you helping us understand and navigate this, because even though I've attended a lot of educational work sessions, it's been a lot of information, and I think a lot of people are still navigate. We had at the budget conference this past weekend too, there was a lot of information too, and after about 20 minutes, my brain kind of went numb again, because I was like, okay, I got to reconcile this with all the other presentations I've heard. Anyway, I'm all in. I think this is great. Commissioner Kafas, I saw you moving. Do you have some other things you'd like to add in? Did you want to?
I'm also in, that we should opt in for Prop 123 dollars, and I'm presuming we could use those dollars in terms of preservation, potentially use some of those dollars, depending on the amounts, for supporting, encouraging resident-owned communities. And when you mentioned about capacity building, could some of those dollars be used to help improve our capacity to do the housing work that we'd like to do? So could we use it for helping with funding resident-owned communities, and could we use it to improve our staffing capacity?
Yes to both. Yes, there is a specific fund within the Prop 123 that's been designated to help mobile home residents purchase their home. So we could help by providing TA or assisting communities that are interested in looking into that fund. But like I stated earlier, there's no guarantee for our region to receive funds, but it does open the door, right? And then also, as far as capacity for Larimer County for community development, it allows us to apply for those funds as well.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Leah. I think we've given direction. So did you?
Thank you. And then,
Can I just chime in real
Yeah,
quick? 'Cause it builds off of this, and Rebecca asked that maybe we speak likely to this. Is that okay? Oh, was you going to do the grant? Okay, then I'll let you do that. I didn't know if she wanted me to chime in. I'll let you approach it. Thank you. I'll take care.
Okay, so, yep, we're
So,
switching
yes.
gears then. All right, thank you, Leah. Fantastic work as always.
Yeah, great. So
Commissioner Gonzalez, did you,
I just,
or Stevens, I wasn't sure if you're pointing at her and pointing at me.
no, I was pointing because I remember one thing. What's the timeline for this? Like, are we going to put this on a schedule to formally adopt it? Is that how we have to do it, or is?
And
or no?
do we have to sign a consent agenda thing?
I don't believe so. I can go opt in this afternoon if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do it. Who would you
I
know?
think it's as simple as opting in online, and you're authorizing her today to do that, and so that's what we'll do.
Fantastic.
Sometimes it takes more formal action.
I'll follow up as far as it being approved by the state. That's the part that we would be waiting on.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And then on a related but slightly different issue, Rebecca has been looking at a Department of Local Affairs grant program, Strong Communities Planning Grant Program that supports local governments that plan for sustainable growth and development patterns and affordable housing. And so she's talked to the state, the folks at DOLA, and will be talking to our partners around the region, has at least talked to Fort Collins already about getting a letter of support. But she wanted to give the board a heads up that she's looking at this and may need a letter of support for the October 2nd grant deadline, and that she would be looking at the grant with the goal of implementing a combination of an update to the 2021 housing needs assessment. That would be something that would pair up nicely with Leah's work, that would establish and update intergovernmental agreements related to growth management, that would potentially update one or more growth management areas to municipalities, and then also develop a template or pilot for a new transfer of development, transfer of density units, a TDU program, and that's where Matt can provide some insights if you have questions about what that might accomplish. And it fits within the goals of the program. And so I think this is something that has a lot of good potential. The grant amount request would be $250,000, which would require $25,000 in matching grants. So it's a very nice match for us if we can apply for that. And then about $100,000 of that would go to the housing needs assessment update, and then the remainder would go to some of those other programs. So I think we were just mostly giving you a heads up today that she can come back and provide a bit more information next week, and then would likely put a letter of approval for your request on the admin matters for the 26th of next week, basically. And if you have questions about any of that, or in particular TDUs, Matt's here to help address that as well.
Sounds great. Colleagues, do you have any questions about that? Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, so with the housing need assessment, we've already kind of done that work. So would this be like an update to that work, or is there additional work that would be done through that kind of assessment?
Yeah.
Yes, this would be an update. So that prior housing needs assessment was a really great start, and it used a lot of pre-pandemic data. So in order to move forward, and best practice is to have a needs assessment done every few years. So I think this is a good opportunity to update that and get some better information around what's needed across the county.
Thank you. And then is this kind of in line with some of the land use kind of work that was maybe, is this sort of starting us on the path of like better land use as was suggested in the land use bill kind of thing? Is this sort of because there were a lot of assessments that were talked about, you can't really, how you need to build out your community and things like that. Is that kind of in the similar vein of where the land use bill was going last year?
I believe so. It sounds like that's how it's structured, and it pairs up nicely, I think, with that policy direction as well as, I mean, it fits very well with our own policy direction and our comprehensive plan and a lot of the housing work that we've been doing as well. And some of the conversations we've had with our municipal partners like Wellington, who's expressed interest in moving forward with updating their, a plan, a growth management, intergovernmental agreement. Fort Collins, who we've worked with all along, and our other partners who have done that sort of work. And then the transfer development unit or density unit program is something that could work very well with the municipal partner to accomplish housing goals, but also accomplish conservation goals in the region. So that's something that we've done in the past. We haven't done very recently, but I think there's potential to do that again with our municipal partners.
Thanks, Leslie. Matt, is there anything you wanted to add on the
Yeah, I would just
TDU
add
piece?
that the TDU program was a nationally recognized TDU program that we did for years down the False Creek area and that whole area out between Levelland and Fort Collins as part of a conservation thing. And the big point that I think we want to even bring forward with this grant is that it piggybacks on 1, 2, 3. And it, if we can be working with some of these funds to do some of the intergovernmental agreements or to use TDUs to send units into the municipalities and get those credits back on those 98 or 99 units, then we're using that grant to not only help us with land use matters, but also to supplement some of the things that would be going on with Proposition 123.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds great. Thank you. Thanks for explaining that.
Okay, I think we're moving on. Thank you for that information.
All right.
Okay, and
And that is all we have for today. So
so you don't have an update yourself?
I don't have anything that's really relevant to share right now. So
Okay, well, as always, you guys get through a very packed agenda. Thank you for all the information, and thank you everyone in the room for being here today. And at 2:27, we are adjourned. Have a great day.